Okay, Jim Condon, thank you very much for being here with us. So, radio in Vermont, we have a lot of radio stations in Vermont.
Yeah, we do, John, and thanks for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be with you. We've got about 100 radio stations in the state of Vermont, and I'm happy to report that the industry is doing well. I mean, we had a dip in the recession, just like probably every other industry in the state, but things are coming back and looking good.
Is country the biggest format in the state, or is it
Well,
news
actually,
talk?
if I was going to say which format, it's probably Vermont Public Radio. It probably has the largest audience of any radio format in the state, and I would say country music would be second to that.
Now, some people are saying that while radio, more than 90% of the people in the country listen to the radio, not necessarily every day, but I think at least once a week. But in Vermont, it's only 86 point something percent. So we lag a little bit, and
We don't have as long commutes as some other states.
the aggregate audience is perhaps a little less here than in other states. Does that make sense to you?
Well, actually, nationally, radio listening is up across the board. We're actually at record levels. And you'd think that, with Facebook and XM Sirius, that listening would be down and people having their iPods, but actually listenership is up. More people listening more to their radios, their over-the-air radios, and frankly, I think listenership is doing pretty well in Vermont, and our commutes actually aren't as short as you might think, John.
Oh, really?
We a few years ago we ranked second in the nation in number of miles commuted per person, behind Montana. So actually, we do have some pretty major commutes.
VPR also has a news oration.
Yes.
And DEV has a news operation.
Yes.
Does anybody else?
Yes. WTSA in Brattleboro. Tim Johnson has been there for years. He's a legend, and he is a news machine. We have WSTJ up in St. Johnsbury, does a good job. There are other stations in smaller markets that do a nice job for local news. It's not as widespread as it used to be. It used to be every station had a local news department, and I was part of that, working as a news director at a few stations, and so I do miss that prevalence of news operations. But John, in the old days, the radio station would be up against the newspapers.
Right.
The newspapers would print once a day. The radio stations had the luxury of reporting breaking news throughout the day.
As it happens.
Right, and some of that's been taken away now by the newspapers with their websites and by the Twitters and Facebooks and so forth. And it's expensive to mount a good news operation. We had a period of time, John, where we had some chains coming in, like a Clear Channel, owned a bunch of stations in Vermont. This company, which is based in Dallas, I believe, believed that they could really cut corners and turn a larger profit by basically having a format delivered from their headquarters in Dallas and eschewing the local content. And they found out that doesn't work. People like to listen to their local stations. They like to find out what's happening local. Tip O'Neill said all politics is local. I had a chance to interview him one time, and he was great, but he was right. It's that local content that really is keeping our radio stations vibrant.
So even most of aside from the talk radio, VPR, DEV, and a few others, most of it's music.
Most of it's music. I think everyone has some news content.
Right.
National news, and they usually have some local headlines.
But even in music, people are more. The audience is more comfortable if somebody in Burlington, Montpelier, Bennington is spinning the records or whatever.
Yeah,
whatever it
because
is.
they can call up, and they can request a tune, or they can say, I lost my cat, or I've got something I like to, swap. I'm looking for firewood. You get them all.
Right.
But people want to, communicate with their local broadcasters.
So then what happened to Clear Channel?
Well, they're no longer in Vermont.
Right. And why do you think that is? Did they sell out? They sold their station.
They had to. They were losing too much money across the country. They still exist.
They still exist.
Yeah,
Right.
but they had to trim down their operations because people want local radio, and they weren't doing enough, I think, local content. Per person, we have the most radio signals, behind only like Flagstaff, Arizona, or something. So we have a lot of signals versus the number of people here.
Right.
Yeah, actually, the first station on the air, actually transmitting telegraphy, was WCAX. This was the College of Agricultural Extension, and it started at the University of Vermont. And they were into Morse code, and they'd come back from World War I, and they finally got a transmitter, a 100-watt transmitter, and they were sending telegraphy. Then you had WQDM in St. Albans, which is now WWSR, still exists, and they went on the air, and WLAK, as I mentioned, in Springfield, and there was a station in Bellows Falls, too. I may have them backwards, but the College of Agricultural Extension, CAX, well, that's now, of course, a TV station,
Right.
but it's also the radio station still exists, it's WVMT. And that was WCAX.
Well, there's a little history lesson I didn't know.
Yeah, and the Burlington Daily News owned them at one point. And their studios were on College Street, I think.